Hi everyone, today I'm going to be teaching you how to make mini apple pies. These are really good comfort food, especially during this time where everyone's really stressed and under pressure. And they're also mini size, so you can have them individually portioned without that feeling of guilt. And all you need are flour, salt, butter, ice water, sugar, cinnamon, apples, and an egg. You should be able to have almost everything in your house. There are 3 parts to this recipe. First, we're going to make the dough, then we're going to make the filling, and then we're going to assemble it all together. And without further ado, let's get to it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure out our flour. Like I said, you need 2.5 cups. So make sure that you measure it out and level it out correctly. That's 1 cup. 2 cups. And 1/2 cup. And then I'm going to mix that with my salt. At this point, you can also add sugar if you want to make your dough a little bit sweeter, because but our filling is going to be sweet, so you don't need to add sugar. This is 1 teaspoon of salt. And I'm just going to mix that a little together. And once that is all mixed together, it just looks like flour. We're going to add our butter into that. So for the butter, you're going to first cut it into chunks about a tablespoon in width. And make sure that it's cold again, because we want the cold butter to be in our dough to make it extra flaky. And once that is cut up, that's 1 cup of butter. So 1 cup is 2 sticks of butter. And we're just gonna drop it into our flour mixture. Doing the same thing for the other stick of butter. And at this point, if you have a pastry cutter, you can use that to cut your butter into the flour. But if you don't have a pastry cutter, that's okay. You can just use a knife and a fork and just cut the butter into the flour, making sure to break up your chunks. And you're going to want big chunks of butter so that they melt in the oven when we're baking it. And then I cut up my butter into chunks, and now I am just cutting up my 1 cup of butter inside my flour. You're going to want to make them about the size of a coin, like a quarter. So right now my butter has been made into chunks. I'm just going to make them a little bit smaller. We don't want to make them too small because mini apple pies have a very large crust to filling ratio, so we want to make it as flaky as possible. And when it melts in the oven, when the butter melts in the oven, that's what makes it so flaky. Okay, at this point, my butter has been created into crumbs, and now I'm going to start to add ice water little by little without putting any ice in the dough. So I'm just going to take about 1/8 cup and I'm going to sprinkle it into my dough, and I'm going to just stir it around. 1/2 cups of flour. So I'm continuing to add water a little bit at a time without getting the ice. And we just want to make sure that it all comes together without making it too sticky. So at this point, if you want, you can go in with your hands and start to mix it around. And I'm going to continue adding more water. The ice is just to make sure that the butter doesn't melt.
because that butter is what makes the dough so flaky. As you can see, it's already getting pretty flaky. And if you use salted butter, don't put the extra salt in your flour. Once your dough has come together a little bit, you can empty the dough onto your plastic wrap on your table, and we're just gonna knead it together, continuing to add water until it forms a ball. So I'm just trying to pick up all this extra flour that has come on my plastic wrap and add it into the dough while kneading it with my hands, pushing down and lifting up and turning, pushing down and then turning again.
You only have one stick of unsalted butter, like half the recipe.
Yeah, if you don't have the full recipe, you can always half this recipe with 1 1/4 cups of butter, flour, and all the rest. So just a reminder of what we did so far. At this point, my dough has come together, so I'm just going to take the plastic wrap and I'm going to wrap it around. So my dough looks like this. It's come together into a ball, and you can see some butter chunks in there. And I'm going to wrap this and I'm going to put it in the fridge until we need it again. Okay, the next part of our recipe is the filling. So for the filling, you're going to need your cutting board, and you're going to need 2 apples. Mine are really big, so I'm only using 2, but if yours are smaller, then you can use 3. And we're going to start by peeling the apples. You can always leave the peel on, but most people like that texture when the peel is off because it makes it softer. Also, if you don't have apples, you can use strawberries or blueberries. When you cook strawberries or blueberries, you're going to add a tablespoon of cornstarch and a dash of lemon juice just to make it thicken. Apples already have that thickening quality. Also, if you don't have any fresh fruit, you can use preserves or jam. And with that, you don't need to do anything. It's already prepared. And once you're done peeling your apples, you're going to start cutting them, making sure you get the core out. And then cut them into very small pieces because these pies are so mini that the smaller you make the pieces, the more filling you can get inside the pies. So now that I'm done peeling my apples, I'm going to start compost those. And I'm going to start cutting my apples. And then right now I'm just going to slice it into slices, thin slices, and then I'll cross hatch the other way to make small diced pieces. This is about the size that we want them. I started baking when I was very young. My mom used to make cakes for everyone's birthdays, and I would just help her in the kitchen. And then soon I just wanted to do everything by myself. So I started baking my own things. So when you're cutting, a good tip, if you have a big knife like mine, you want to keep the tip on the surface and press down with your wrist. And make sure you don't keep your fingers in the way.
How did you learn to cut with such a big knife?
I took a culinary class last year, and we learned a lot of knife skills in that class. If you're too nervous to use a big knife like this, that's fine. I just find that a big knife with apples, since they're so hard, it's easier to use a big knife, but a smaller knife would be fine as well.
do you do when you're not baking?
When I'm not baking, I like to play soccer and I like to sketch. I also like I'm starting my own business, so that's taking up a lot of my time. I like my apron too.
What's your business?
My business is not fully fleshed out yet, but I'm taking a marketing class right now and I find marketing really fun. So, yeah. So for the filling, what we have done so far, we peeled our apples and then we took out the cores and now we're cutting them into small chunks. And then after that, we're going to add it to a pot. Like if you have a wide, shallow pot, that works best like this. And I'm just gonna add it to the pot. And then we're gonna add 1/3 of a cup of granulated sugar. So here's my granulated sugar. And we're going to add 1/3 of a cup, making sure to level it out and sprinkle it over the apples. And then we're going to add our 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, ground cinnamon. So there's my 1/2 teaspoon. I'm just going to sprinkle it over the apples. And then I'm going to mix it together. And once that's all mixed up, we're going to put it on the stove on medium to low heat for about 8 to 10 minutes. And we're going to be stirring quite often just to make sure that it doesn't burn. Now we're going to move on to the dough portion. I have sprinkled some flour onto my workspace to make sure that our dough doesn't stick. Some flour on top of it to make sure that our rolling pin doesn't stick to it. And we're going to take a rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, that's okay. You can use a bottle or a can or anything circular really, or even like a glass like this. You can roll out with that. And you're going to take your rolling pin and you're going to roll from the center and push out and turn it. And then roll from the center, push out and turn it. Making sure that if your rolling pin is sticking, that means that you don't have enough flour on your dough. And we're just going to keep turning and pushing. And once in a while, we flip it over and add a little bit more flour. You should be able to see those chunks of butter in there. That's a good sign. If it's cracking, if your dough is cracking, you can take some water like I have here and mend that crack, because if it's cracking, that means you don't have enough moisture in your dough. So that's what my dough looks like. You can see those chunks of butter in there. And yeah. I just flip it over. I see some cracks and I'm going to mend them with some water. And then I'm going to keep pushing and turning my dough. And flipping it. Once we want the dough to be about 1/8 of an inch in thickness. So once you reach that point, stop. We don't want the dough to break. So right now my dough is probably about 1/4 of an inch. So I just want to keep rolling it out. Make sure you use your arms and push down the whole way. As you can see, my rolling pin's stuck there, so I just need to add a little bit more flour. And at this point is that now would be a good time to preheat your oven. So you need to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm taking my circular cookie cutter and I'm going to push down on my dough and twist at the same time. And your dough should come free like that. If you have cookie cutters, that would work too. So I have these cookie cutters. I'm just gonna push it in and wiggle it around a little, and that will come out. Even if you have design cookie cutters, so this is a heart, I'm going to push it in and wiggle it around a little. You want about, if you're making a design, you want at least 2 of the same thing because they're gonna go one on top of each other. And once you have all your shapes cut out, you can take them out of the dough. And then we're just gonna roll that dough up again because there's still a lot of dough. And we're gonna do the same thing we just did. Yeah, so I'm just gonna ball it up and sprinkle my surface with flour again. And now I'm putting it down and I'm rolling it out again. And my thing is sticking, so I'm going to add more flour.
Your Instagram?
My Instagram is at @Isla. You can DM me there if you have any questions about baking or if you want any good recipes. Once again, we're making it about 1/8 of an inch thickness. Just pushing out and turning. If you want, you can make some square cutters. Those can work as well. Just make sure you have 2 of the same thing. So for that, I make a rectangle and cut it in half to make 2 squares that look like that. Cutting some more circles out. And put them aside. And we're gonna keep rolling it out, balling it up and rolling it out until we have amount of apples. So this is what the apples look like right now. They have some liquid coming out of them because apples retain some liquid. And right now, if I press my spoon into an apple, it seems pretty soft and it's breaking. So these are just about ready to be taken off the stove. So I'm going to turn off my heat and I'm going to put them to the side. We want them to cool before we put them on the dough because we don't want them to melt the butter. And on half of the ones that we've been cutting out, we're going to take some slits, or take our knife and cut in some slits. So I just added like that, and they look like that. That's going to be our top piece for our pies. Yes, it looks like that with 2 little slits in it. And that's what we're going to make sure that the pies don't burst. So they have a little bit of air in the oven. If you want to make it a little bit more fancy, you can even take a small cookie cutter and cut into your circle. Looks like that. So now I have a little heart that can be my hole on top. If you want, you can take those extra pieces that you cut out from the dough and you can put it on top to make a design on another one. And that gives it a little bit of creativity as well. Now I'm going to get my baking sheets. They look like this, and I have a silicone baking mat on top. If you don't have to have that. You can also have a sheet of parchment paper and just put that on top. And I'm gonna put my little pie, only the bottoms on the sheet. They don't have to be too far apart since they don't spread that much. And once I have those on my baking sheet, I'm going to grab, that's about how they look. And I grab my apples and I'm going to take about a tablespoon of those apples, just scoop them up. They should be cooled by now, or somewhat cooled. They will bake a little bit more in the oven, so they don't have to be completely soft. And I'm just going to put it on the center. And then I'm going to grab my finger and dip it in some water. And I'm going to just brush the edges with some water. And then I'll take my top piece and put it on top and just press it down a little bit on the edges. And we'll do the same thing with the other pies. Grab about a tablespoon and put it in the center. Dip your finger in water, brush the edges. The water just helps the top dough stick to the bottom dough a little bit.
Parchment paper is fine.
Yes, if you don't have a silicone baking mat, you can use a parchment paper piece. Just all we need is something to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom. So this one was the one I used my cookie cutter with. So I'm making sure to use the same one on top.
375 please.
And I brush that, and I put that on top. And now I have some more filling. With the bigger ones, you don't have to use exactly a tablespoon. You can use more or less depending on how big your pies are.
Please repeat the steps again.
So just another way you can do this is if you have just a single piece, fill only half of it, and then you fold it over. Make sure you brush one side with water, and then fold it over, and you can make a little taco-like shape. Also, these pies can be frozen. So once you finish this, you can put them in the freezer and you can keep them for about a month maximum. And once you have done this, we're gonna just brush them with some egg yolks. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my egg, and if you don't have an empty water bottle, which is what we're gonna use to separate it, that's fine. You can separate it with your hands. I'm just gonna show you a little trick that I like to use for separating my yolks from my whites. So I just crack my egg, make sure I don't break the yolk. And then I take my water bottle and I squeeze a little bit. And as I'm touching the egg yolk, I'm just gonna let go of my squeezing and it should come up inside the water bottle. And then I take another bowl and I just let it squeeze and let go. And it should come out inside the other bowl. You can set those whites aside. Those can be used for whatever you want. And we're going to add 2 tablespoons of water and mix it with that. And we're going to take our fork and just whip it together a little bit. You can just add some egg yolk with your finger and brush it all along the top of the pie, and that's going to give that nice golden brown edge or golden brown top. And we're going to do that for all of them. If you're freezing your pies, you're going to want to wait to do this step until after, when you're actually ready to bake them. That's because the egg yolks don't freeze very well. And once you have that golden brown egg yolk on top, you can take a fork.
For strawberries,
And you're going to take your fork and you're going to press down on the edges of the pie. So just press and pull out. Press and pull out. Can you zoom in? You're just going to press and pull out on the dough to make a nice little design, and also to press the two pieces together. And once this is done, you're going to bake it for 20 to 25 minutes. If you need a little bit longer, that's up to you. Just look at the pies, and whenever they start to turn golden brown, that's when you know they're ready. And when they come out, they should look something like this. You want to check on it to make sure that the bottoms are golden brown and the edges are also golden brown. And these are some of the half taco type shapes, and that's what they should look like.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed making apple pies, and comment what you want to see me bake next. Please like and subscribe for more videos, and have a great day. Bye!